All right, good afternoon. Welcome to Spectra7's presentation this afternoon. I'm Raouf, Halim, CEO of Spectra7. Just a quick reminder, first of all, our presentation is provided with our usual disclaimers, in essence, safe harbor. So let me start with a quick introduction to Spectra7. We are a high-performance analog, extremely unique semiconductor company. Our product platform is based on some very advanced and highly patented intellectual property in the area of analog very specifically. We're headquartered in San Jose, which is obviously, as many of you know, Silicon Valley. We are listed on the Toronto Stock Exchange on the big board, symbol SEV, again, SEV. What Spectra7 is all about is basically enabling connectivity such that systems can connect to each other and become smaller, lighter, and faster. A very good example of that is shown on this particular slide that you'd see at the bottom. Approximately 3.5 years ago, a very small company at the time by the name of Oculus came to Spectra7, said, hey, we're designing a virtual reality or VR headset. The problem we have is that we need to connect this headset to a high-performance laptop. The cabling required to do that is pretty complicated. It's a lot of cables. There's a cable for high-speed data, cable for control, for audio, for power, and so forth. The resulting cabling solution is large, it's bulky, and actually impedes people's ability to immerse themselves in the VR experience afforded by this head-mounted display. He said it's kind of tough for people to walk around with this, right? It limits the range of motion, it's heavy, consumes a lot of power. And can you, Spectra7, please work with us based on your unique IP and the analog ICs you have to collapse that cabling, that great big cabling harness, to a single thin, light cable. That is what you see today at Best Buy, wherever you may go, when you look at what is now Facebook, head-mounted display. Okay? So eventually, Oculus was acquired by Facebook, as many of you know. And our technology is now in production, and a perfectly good example of that, once again, you would see at Best Buy or other outlets. So what Spectra7 is really all about is broadband connectivity, high-speed connectivity of systems. Okay? And we believe that we are able to elevate the performance of copper cable connectivity, to compete with optical fiber. Okay? Whenever you can do that, you offer superior economics, much lower cost, but also lower power and other advantages over optical. So just a quick summary of the company. As I mentioned, we're listed on the Toronto Stock Exchange, the so-called big board, as SEV. As of the end of September, our share price was 41 cents. I think it's about there today. Market cap is roughly $50 million USD, 50, give or take. Based on the exchange rate. I'm not sure exactly what the exchange is right now, but it's right around 67 million Canadian. Trailing 12 months revenue through the end of June was $9.3 million. We pride ourselves on addressing some very exciting high growth markets, but also, as I mentioned, with a very unique value prop that allows us to be single sourced with our customers and enjoy high gross margins. So you'd see that the trailing 12 months gross margin is 60%, that's 60, one of the highest in the semiconductor industry. And insider ownership is roughly 4.5%. Okay? So just at a high level, we're an extremely focused company. I'll talk about the markets we're addressing in a minute. But those are, we believe, the most exciting, highest growth opportunities in the semiconductor industry, and particularly in connectivity. We have transformative design wins. I'll talk about some of the OEMs who we are in production with today and some of our design win pipeline in subsequent slides, but particularly in the AR, augmented, virtual, and mixed reality categories. We have a very strong pipeline of design wins that is really taking this company places. And very good early acceptance of our data center products. And again, I'll talk about that class of solutions in just a minute. Once again, addressing the interconnect opportunity, the cabling interconnect opportunity in the data center. Our visibility is growing in the space, and we have a number of operational programs underway to continue streamlining the company while improving gross margin. Myself, I've been on board for about a year with Spectra7. It's almost exactly, a little over a year now, I guess a year and a couple of weeks. And very happy to be there, delighted with our progress. The team is a very strong team as well. As some of you know, I have a lot of experience running public companies, most previously Mindspeed Technologies, which was NASDAQ listed, which we exited in late 2015 for just under $300 million. Dave Meir, our CFO, brings a lot of experience from the industry, particularly from Sun and Yahoo. Andrew Kim, our CTO, is a PhD from MIT, is a real guru in this area of analog signal processing. John Mitchell really knows the ins and outs of the space and has a tremendous Rolodex with the top-tier OEMs, the big names that we'd all recognize. Jerry Hamilton is reported to be for 27 years in various companies and joined me at Spectra7 to head up worldwide sales. Trito runs ops, and Ibrahim joined us from Molex. He's primarily focused on the data center opportunity, which, as I'll talk about, I think you realize is the gold mine for the company. We are the leader in this category called active copper cable. And let me just frame it for you a little bit by saying there's basically three ways to connect electronics. One is over the air. We all enjoy mobile phones and many other mobile devices. The RF medium, while it offers obviously unique mobility advantages, has many, many constraints, not the least of which is limited throughput. With the best of wireless connectivity today, you might get to about 4 or 5 gigabits per second. That's new technologies that are in the 60 gigahertz type of range. So wireless, while it's extremely attractive from a mobility perspective, again, has limitations in terms of throughput. The other possibility is obviously what people know as passive copper cabling. That's been around about 120 years since the invention of the telephone. Copper cabling, standalone, what's called passive copper cabling, has its own sets of issues, namely impairments and loss and so forth. So copper cabling has, is generally kind of topped out at low data rates as well, which create a great opportunity for optical fiber, which is the third means of connecting electronics, and optical fiber has been leveraged heavily in data center and telecom, datacom infrastructure, and so forth. So with that in mind, what Spectra7 is really all about is leveraging our high-performance analog technology to enable copper cabling to get to the next level. Get faster, lower power, at lower cost points. That's what we're all about. That capability has been leveraged by many customers. You see a sampling of those on the slide. These are customers that are buying, actively purchasing, and or ramping our products in production today. A real who's who of leaders in the electronics industry. Additionally, our position is well secured by over 50 issued patents in the active copper cable category. We're single sourced with our customers. We enjoy 60% gross margin just about every quarter. Last quarter was actually smidge high. We came in about 63%, if I remember right. So that's a quick flyover of the company. Let me next get into a little more detail on the specific markets that we're addressing. There's actually three of those. Virtual reality, or VR for short, is here and now. The bulk of our revenues are coming from the VR marketplace. Again, key customers would include people like Facebook, Oculus, HTC, many others. AR, which is now often referred to as MR, mixed reality, and I apologize for all the acronyms. This is a very acronym-rich industry, is starting to ramp for us. The poster child of MR is the Windows 10 initiative by Microsoft, which is driving the whole PC OEM space into this new era of virtualized connectivity and a whole slew of new applications as well. We enjoyed our first AR/MR revenues last quarter. This is going to be a very exciting space for us going forward. VR is driven largely by gaming, so it's sort of a gaming platform, immersive gaming, I would say, a whole host of 3D applications, where AR/MR is expected to be much larger ultimately, mainly because it is addressing a lot of business, B2B, and B2C types of applications. And that's, as I mentioned, is just starting to ramp for us. Finally, the data center, the real gold mine of an opportunity, one that I know very well. At Mindspeed, we address data centers very effectively. And this is a market that's large and growing at about 60% a year as we speak. One where a differentiated value proposition that Spectra7 brings can really transform the connectivity opportunity there and continue to drive high revenue at high margin. It's just a snapshot on the TAMs that we're addressing. These are third-party reports. Perhaps most salient is the VR opportunity right now, which is obviously growing at a fairly fast clip. But with a lot of new applications, as well as lower price points, we're seeing MR/AR start to take off. I'll talk about much lower price points and some of the applications later in the presentation. Our product set for VR is known as Dreamweaver. It's the industry's leading technology platform for high-speed copper connectivity, again deployed by a number of Tier 1 OEMs. What's happening with these devices is people are going up to higher resolution. When you're wearing a display literally on your face, you're very close to the pixels in the display. At home, you might have a 1K TV on the wall, a display on the wall, and you think, gee, 1K is pretty good. Obviously, we want more all the time. But when the display is very close to your eyeballs, you can actually see the pixelation a lot easier. And sometimes you can see effects when the moving items in the display. You can actually see some streaking and other effects like that. So in VR, and actually all flavors of AR, MR, and so forth, the name of the game is to go to better displays, higher density, higher resolution. As you do that, the data rate required to connect those displays to a laptop or a desktop or any kind of computer engine go up. So for instance, when you get up to 4K displays and someday 5K, you need something close to 50 gigabits per second. That's 50. These are very high data rates that obviously cannot be approached by any other kind of connectivity. Wireless, as I mentioned, kind of poops out around 4 or 5 gigabits per second. Okay? And our product set supports all the way up to 50 gigabits per second, the Dreamweaver, which is critical to enable very immersive, enjoyable experience, but also gesture recognition. Many of these devices, you're actually gesturing with your hands in air. You're virtually clicking and combining objects and doing some other 3D types of algorithms. And so that requires very high bandwidth for ultra-high definition video, gesture recognition, so on and so forth. And today, our product set is unparalleled in the industry. This just shows you a sampling. The images you see at the top are customers are in production with Spectra7 powered cables. So these are all tethered VR, MR type devices where the copper cable itself is boosted and enabled by Spectra7 technology on either end. Okay? And a very active space. You see a number of the key players at the bottom of the slide as well. So we're in a great place and expecting to go to an even better place over time. Most importantly, I mentioned quickly sort of the big 800-pound gorilla in the MR space. With Microsoft pushing Windows 10, a lot of this is all public information, into the space, we believe that AR, MR is quickly becoming reality. The first rollout of these devices is targeted for Christmas of this year, so just in a few months. And what Microsoft is doing is rolling out a soup to nuts reference design for these mixed reality displays. Developer kits have shipped. Most importantly, the price point is very consumer friendly, right at $300. Compare and contrast that to the first generation of head-mounted displays, which are sort of $1,000, give or take. People have been trying to bring those down to the $700, $800, some case $600 range, but when you start at $300, it's a heck of a place. It's very consumer-friendly. Many of these devices will be bundled as well with laptops coming out in Christmas of this year, and the bundling opportunity here is a great one. You see a growing roster of OEMs, PC OEMs, who are adopting and rolling out the solution at the bottom of the slide, essentially the who's who of PC OEMs. There are a large number of other players as well that are as yet unnamed, and I can't really share those names, but some of them are actually rather big names. Not that these are small names, these are all very large players. And in all cases, they are reliant. Again, in all cases, they are reliant on Spectra7 active copper cable to connect their head-mounted display to the laptop. It's a huge instantiation for us. Let me shift gears and talk about the data center market. This is not revenue generating for us right now, but we do expect revenues to start in the data center market for us in 2018. This is a large market, as all of you know. The bulk of the competition and suppliers today are focused on the electronics inside the switch, the router, so it's if you will, in the box. What Spectra7 is focused on is the data center interconnect, which is the stuff outside the box, so pictorially depicted in the bottom left-hand corner of the slide. Enormous opportunity. Data center interconnect revenue this year alone is north of $2.5 billion. So it's large and it's underserved and it's growing at 60% CAGR. Okay? This is a really sweet place to be. And we bring a very compelling value proposition to the data center. You see a little bit about that on this particular slide. Again, if you go back to my comment at the beginning about sort of the three key mediums to communicate: wireless, there's copper cabling, so-called passive, and then this new category of active. That's us on the right-hand side. We're able to take a passive copper cable bundle, which typically can barely get to 25 gigabits per second, usually, quite frankly, limited to about 10 gigabits per second. We're able to take that copper bundle and shrink it by a factor of 10. Not to get too technical, but that's a gauge reduction of a factor of 10. And the way we do that is with our patented analog, high-performance analog ICs on either end of the copper cable. That drives a very important value proposition to the operator, whoever that may be. Could be a Google, could be an eBay, could be an Amazon. And that value prop is not just better airflow, which they will get because the cable's, it's a smaller bundle, but a very significant power reduction over the alternative, which is optical fiber. With an optical fiber, you've got to convert the electronics from an electronic signal to light, wavelengths, right? That process is very power consuming. It's inefficient. With copper, everything stays electrical. There's no conversion. Our solution is about 80% lower power as compared to optical fiber. We demonstrated earlier this year at DesignCon in Santa Clara 100 gigabits and 200 gigabits over active copper cable for the data center. And once again, if you're leveraging this huge installed base of copper manufacturers, copper is really cheap. If you can get copper to the speed and performance that you need, it's always cheaper than anything else. It's about roughly half or almost two-thirds the cost of optical fiber. It's a very large, attractive opportunity and also a high-margin opportunity for Spectra7. At the end of the day, an operator looks at this technology as an alternative to optical fiber or limited copper cabling and sees that this brings them huge economic benefits, both in terms of the capital outlay, when they're fitting out a system, a whole data center or point of presence, but also in terms of the ongoing operational costs. The power bill is the most expensive part of owning a data center. Once you've invested in all the capital for the switches and the routers, built out all the point of presence, you're now faced with this typically extraordinarily expensive power bill every month. And anything that brings power down is very valuable to a data center operator. Finally, just from a product perspective, we also have what I would call, I use the word legacy, but sort of an older product line of industry standard cables that are boosted for length. So for instance, in your family room, if you have a Blu-ray player on one side of the room and your display happens to be 15, 20 feet away or more, you need a special cable, a special HDMI cable that will connect the Blu-ray to the display. And, we're able to bring that to the market using, once again, the same kind of active copper cable booster technology. You have DisplayPort solutions, HDMI, USB, and so forth. So, again, these are sort of the three key product areas for Spectra7. The VR MR segment, talked about the data center starting to ramp next year, and then this platform. Okay. So just to wrap up, and then I'll take questions. Hopefully now you've seen that we're very targeted companies, and the markets we've chosen to target are, I certainly believe, are the most attractive markets in the industry today. The highest growth, most attractive ones. Tremendous pipeline with a who's who of customers that any company would love to have. Very strong early acceptance of our data center products, improving visibility and leverage in the business model. Thank you. For plenty of time for questions. Please. Yes.
Looking at the second objective.
Yes.
Industry leaders in AR, VR, MR. Who are your top customers there? And who would you hope they are in 3 years from now?
Okay, the question is in the VR, broadly speaking, the VR segment, who are our customers today and who would we hope they will be in 3 years? That's a very leading question. But let me tell you, the second part is, let me tell you, let me answer the first one, which is a little easier to answer. But obviously today, we're in production with the ilk of people like Facebook, Oculus, and HTC, as I mentioned.
Pilots or these?
No, volume production.
Okay.
Volume. Yeah. If you're familiar, yes. So if you go to a Best Buy and ask for a Facebook Oculus VR headset, that's going to be connected through a cable that Spectra7 provides. Yeah. We've been in production with Oculus for about a couple of years now. HTC has a product called the Vive. I don't know if you're familiar with the Vive. It's a very successful product. That's us as well. Recently, as in the last few weeks, people have done teardowns of the new equipment that's just come to market, and they've shown our electronics in HP devices, Dell, and a couple of others like that. You'll see that online. As to who I'd like to have in the future, you know all the big consumer names, and so no point in rattling them off.
Who's the rainmaker for you in that business? On the management team, I mean, is there a particular guy or girl on the management team that's really got those connections?
You know, we all bust our chops for these sockets, but I would say that certainly between John Mitchell, who's our chief marketing officer, myself, and a few other people, my head of sales and so forth, we're constantly out there.
No, I'm a big believer in that virtual reality. Virtual reality is going to be like the next texting in a certain amount of years.
Yes.
It's going to be a lifestyle thing for people.
Right. And clearly, you're not alone in the belief that VR is going to be the whole new, man-machine standardized MMI for everyone. I certainly subscribe to that myself. I think it's just a matter of time. The whole host of innovations in the actual man-machine interface with VR, a lot of software innovations, and very importantly, the price points that are coming down to enable that to happen. Price points at the beginning were just astronomically high, prohibitively high. And I think for it to experience the kind of broad adoption that we expect, price points are going to have to come way down, which they are. Yes?
Yes. So currently in the data center space, I think the cables are 3 to 5 meters long, right? Will the technology improve over time so it can be used for, let's say, other applications in data centers, for example, connecting interswitch connectivity,
yes,
or even connectivity between data centers? I think, I'm not sure if that's possible, but
okay.
I'm just trying to push the limits of the technology.
So since we're webcast, I'll repeat your question so people online can hear it. So your question is about our data center product set. The reach, basically, of our cabling in the data center. So we actually, our highest reach is about 10 meters right now. Okay, so we go all the way up to 10 meters. The typical lengths are 3 meters, 5 meters, and 10 meters. They're pretty standard in the industry, and we address all of those, which basically spans everything you need within a rack, so top to bottom of the rack, or middle to top, middle to bottom of the rack, and also rack-to-rack connectivity. But currently, we don't have the medium, let alone long-range backhaul that's required. Now, when we do the math and we look at the number of cables sold and the requirements, we think we're addressing 60 to 80% of the TAM comfortably in that, call it 10 meters and below range. Can we get higher? Probably so. It may be a few years as we continue to invest in the technology before we get higher. But right now we have a really sweet opportunity. If we just continue capturing designs, continue to execute in this range, call it 10 meters and below, I think it'll be quite exciting. Thank you for that question. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Is there a limit to sort of capacity for a cable wire? You're going to say you get up to like 120 gigabits, but I know that some optical guys will say we can in the next few years go to 500 gigabits, something like that.
Yes.
What the needs are in the data center. What's the theoretical limit, I guess, to that?
Yeah. So the question is whether there's a theoretical limit, and if so, what is it for boosting copper cable to compete with optical fiber? I would say this: optical fiber is always going to be faster. That's just the way it is, right? But there's no fundamental or theoretical limit to how well you can equalize, compensate, and boost copper cabling. There's not a fundamental limit. We can continue to do that as we are right now. But optical fiber at any given data rate will get there first. Okay? Just because it's pretty easy, right? You just connect it up through optical transceivers. You can get up to, in some cases, 800 gigabits per second, even today. There's no market at 800, very little at 400 gigabits per second. The market's really 100 maybe 200 gigabits per second over the next 5 years. And we're handily addressing that right now. We're right in the middle of that space. But fiber will probably get to 800 and terabits and so forth before us, and that's fine, because there's no market there for a while. We'll get there, no worries. We'll get there when it's important to get there.
And your lower cost of ownership.
Precisely, lower cost, absolutely. Yes, sir, another question.
Just on slide 4, trailing 12 revenues of $9 million.
Correct. So still very small, but growing rapidly.
Assuming you had infinite access to capital, and your share price started to move up, and you were raising equity, what kind of revenues do you think you could achieve?
So,
what do you envision for this?
Okay, great question. So, so the trailing 12 months revenue is obviously, less than $10 million.
So you're showing 99% growth rate for
we are growing.
for a certain market.
That's right. Right, we are.
That's beyond hyper growth.
That's very good growth.
So where's the limit for you guys?
Honestly, I think your question is the right question. Is what's limiting your growth? It's if we had triple, quadruple the development team that we have right now, we'd be broadening our platform like you wouldn't believe, and we definitely could grow faster. So it does come down to capital and the cost of capital ultimately. I mean, that's just the economics behind it, quite honestly. We could grow a lot faster and we could do a lot more leveraging this active copper cable IP platform that I've been talking about. Absolutely.
And your IP protected?
Yes, we have, as I mentioned, over 50 patents issued. Yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Thank you.